The final item is in regards to the county's proposition regarding the public safety sales use tax. And in that regard, the Mason County's Public Safety and Criminal Justice Task Force a couple of years back made a recommendation for increasing revenues to the county, specifically earmarked or dedicated to criminal justice and public safety. The Mason County Criminal Justice Working Team Advisory Committee just recently did the same and recommended the 0.3% sales tax increase for public safety and criminal justice. And then last year, the Mason County Citizens Budget Advisory Committee also made a recommendation specifically for the 0.3% for the county to initiate that proposition and that proposal, which then the county did. They acted on it in Resolution 4119 this year, and will put on the ballot in August a proposition for a 0.3 sales tax for criminal justice public safety purposes. There's a small handout with some of the general information, but to generalize, the revenues that could be generated by those dollars would be about $1,300,000 for the county and a little over $800,000 for the city. These are additional revenues because the city is already receiving a portion of 1%, 0.1% for criminal justice, which the county receives a 40% component of. So with that, I'll turn it over to our chair to discuss what the specifics are for that.
Very good, thanks, Frank. So just to kind of follow up on Frank's comments there, again, we've gone through a process this year of evaluating some revenue to help address, in particular, our jail issues in the county, of which I'm sure the council is very familiar, as is your police chief, who's here in the audience with us tonight. This was vetted through the county's criminal justice working team, of which Councilmember Krantz is a member, and he has been on that and beating the drum for a new jail for quite some time. And
8 years.
Yeah, nobody's counting. So so we've had a number of conversations around that, and so this is the first step first of a few steps towards addressing a new jail, but this would help provide some relief for us at the county in the near term. And if you look at page 2, there's a breakdown of the expenditures that this would help fund, the programming that would help fund, and if you look at the top there, it's all geared toward increasing capacity within our criminal justice system to address the constraints that we have currently. And we also have looked at providing some additional mental health and reentry services, peer services for individuals in the jail and coming out of the jail. And so one of the things that we've been concerned about is recidivism, and so how do we prevent people from continuing to come through our criminal justice system. And we know that the majority of folks that are coming through our jail have either a substance use disorder or behavioral health issue, and so we're using this to look at addressing those critical issues within the jail too. And so we're putting this forward to the community for a vote. It'll be on the August ballot, and so we're hopeful that it would help us address some of our immediate needs, also though providing a look to the future as we consider all of our options with a new jail facility.
Just before we start the conversation, Jeff, you and I had a little conversation about the city's position and public position on this. There's a little something we can do and that we can't do. And being one that wants to be in 100% compliance with things like the Public Disclosure Commission, I think if you could make a statement, isn't there's something we can say and something that we kind of can't say?
Yeah, so any official act of the council needs to go through a public hearing process with a vote for a resolution, either a yes or no vote for a resolution. During a public hearing process where you have to give both the opponents and the proponents of the measure at equal time to express their concerns. As individual council members, I don't think there's any prohibition that I'm aware of.
What
on your
about the
position.
city's endorsement of this, the city talking about?
That would be the resolution, but as far as individual council members, you're free to.
Well, I'm for it.
Okay. That was easy.
There you go.
One of the restrictions, piggybacking on that comment, some of the restrictions are, and it goes along for the county as well, the commission cannot support the proposition. The commission can identify, and we're in the process of developing a document to that effect, facts of what are the issues around the proposition, but the county can't outright come out and support the proposition that it's put on the ballot for the citizens. So once we've developed a fact sheet, then that'll be presented as well to the city, and it'll be in on the website for within the county.
Yeah, so, I mean, in that regard, this is purely educational material for everybody's consideration. And, you know, we're happy to ask or answer any questions that you might have, you know, kind of as this process unrolls.
Well, speaking from a neutral position, I do know that it is a huge, huge need for jail space and in this community. Okay, so I'm passionate about it because I've been on the criminal justice board for 7 or 8 years, and I think that it's important that the people get an opportunity to say if it's important to them.
And
Deputy Mayor?
Jeff, we've had some conversation very peripherally about what this might look like for the city and how those funds might be spent. Do you think it's something that if this moves forward with the fact sheet from the county, we would be also looking at putting out information on how that would impact city residents and services? Because while we aren't the ones putting the proposition on the ballot, it absolutely will have an impact for our budget, but also for the services to our residents.
Absolutely, and we would put together something similar to what the county has put together about how we would spend the additional revenue to enhance public safety, our criminal justice operations within the city of Shelton.
Since taxes are such a delightful topic for anyone to talk about ever, you know, definitely one of the things to look at is, especially on our side, is just where the crosswalk, you know, this is an expected revenue and where we see this revenue being plugged in. Because when I read, you know, for criminal justice purposes, it's kind of an ambiguous phrase. I mean, we can file lots of things under criminal justice purposes, understanding the greatest need and being able to do what we can with those funds and understanding that, you know, it's not necessarily a bad or a good thing or whatever, but, you know, our biggest chunk of funding in the general fund is law enforcement services for the city. And to be able to bring in a new revenue package to support that, and I believe the tolerance of our constituents is cops are a good thing in this community, and it will help us in many, many ways, I think. I think it'd just be good for us, though, at the city level, to be able to detail very clearly to our constituent base what that would look like. And I know the chief's got some great ideas up his sleeve there. And my second, if I can take a second quick one, is we talked really kind of at a high level about jail. New tax revenue isn't going to necessarily build a new jail, correct? New tax revenue would be supporting and sustaining jail services, et cetera, as you guys kind of laid out. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of the jail plans? I've been out of the loop on the jail issue. Just go for it.
Sure. So I'll kick it off, and commissioners, if you have any additional comments, please feel free. But yeah, so the breakdown is we did, when we considered the revenue that would be generated by this, we did consider a jail funding and improvement reserve to help cover some of the initial consultant costs as we get that process up and running. But we also know that if you build a new facility with increased bed capacity, that you're going to have to staff that, and you're going to see increases in those costs. And so we've also built this in a way that we're also starting to look at addressing those issues as that gets up and running. And the nature of the conversation at the commission has been, and I think this is what we're working under currently is, we're gonna spend the money as those positions are filled. And it's just, we're gonna hold it in reserve until they're, filled and moving forward with that. And so that helps kind of build a reserve for those things going forward, and allows us to address some issues now. The other part of it is we have some funding here for inmate outsourcing to help, with some of the management and of inmate population kind of thing. So that's money that if a new facility were to be built, that could be then transitioned into operational funding for a new facility. Commissioner, do you have any?
You did well.
Well done.
Anything else? I know I personally appreciate you guys taking this on, because that's been probably the largest issue that I've had since I've been mayor, or since I've been on the council, is the issue of public safety and the issue of the jail. So I really appreciate the commissioner taking this on. So.
And if I may add to the commissioner's answer in regards to the question around where is the jail and the joint jail review, the county, Mason County and Grace Harbor County have entered into an interlocal to contract with KMB for consulting services to do a demographic study of both counties, and then come back to both counties with a recommendation on what a joint jail would look like and where, and how it would be funded and how large it would need to be, as well as what Grace Harbor might need on their own, as well as Mason County for ourselves. So we end up getting 3 analysis at once for what each individual county would need and what a joint partnership would look like. And that partnership would generate its own efficiencies to some degree because of the scale of one regional facility as opposed to 2 separate ones. That agreement is coming to the commission with a contract for services from KMB. The Mason County Commission has already drafted some modifications to go back for draft revisions of that agreement. We're still waiting for Grace Harbor's council or commission to come back with some of their draft recommendations. And then we should be moving forward with a combined contract submission to the commissions before the end of this month, which would put a report back on their desks somewhere around Christmas, early January of next year.
Next year or
January of next year.
of 2020?
Yeah, 2020.
Okay.
And I'll just add, just for a little perspective, so I had a chance to talk with some folks in Skagit County who built what I think is probably the newest jail in the state, county jail in the state. And from their initial conversations in their community to getting the jail built and open, took them about 10 years. And so we know that we have an issue today, and we can't wait 10 years to solve it. And so this is a short-term way to begin to address some of those issues. And we know that there's going to have to be a bigger conversation about funding a new facility, but this would help us get some relief in the short term so that we can continue to move forward with both looking at a new facility and take care of some of the issues that we're experiencing today. And so there's plenty of work ahead of us, and this is just the first step.
This may be a ridiculous question, but is this money, is there a sunset on this tax increase? Does it have to come before the people every 4 or 6 years? or-
Not this project, no.
So this money is a yearly income to the county and the city,
Correct.
which then funds these positions because the positions we want to continue on.
Correct.
Okay, so
It's,
just,
it's long-term funding for long-term staff increases.
Councilmember.
okay.
Yeah, what you see on what's being brought forward on our side is increase, not replacement. Almost everything you're seeing there is to bring on new positions, new programs, money set aside for outsourcing, separate than what we have currently.
Councilmember
And,
Dorsey.
and this is flexible enough from our perspective where it can transition into, if we get into a new jail facility, funding that new jail facility as well.
Councilmember Dorsey, do you have?
Yeah, the new, this new jail funding, are there grants for that sort of thing for a jail, or is that something that's totally on the community? Does anybody know?
Typically, it's bonds, it's, you know, I mean, that's how most communities build theirs. You know, we may be able to look at other partnerships. You know, there's already some DOC infrastructure in the county. There may be, you know, from a location standpoint, there may be some partnership opportunities there. I don't recall, and Commissioner Trask may have additional insight on this, but I don't recall jail projects receiving funding in the capital budget. You know, but because it's never happened before, doesn't mean that's a good enough reason to not ask or consider it. And it just, you know, we can have that conversation down the road, or, you know, when we have consultants on board and we get into that process a little bit. But typically it is a community-driven project. And I believe our current facility was built, when it was built in the mid-'80s, was built with state dollars, because there was the Sentencing Reform Act went through in the mid-'80s, and the state saw that and took responsibility for some of those changes and provided funding to build jails. And so if you go across the state, you'll see that there's a lot of facilities that look like ours. It's because of the state's cookie cutter approach to jails. And but since then, I don't think there has been much given to counties for jail projects.
I've looked at that in the past, and the only thing that I saw, there's monies that are available, but they're federal and they're for immigration processes. It's the only thing I've ever found. I'm not saying do it, not do it. I'm just telling you that that's the only ones that I've ever seen exist out there, except for little tiny ones that are never going to get us where we need to go. They're great with those $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 grants, but
And again, this conversation has been going on for like 7 or 8 or 20 or 30 years, and that part of the reasoning with the proposal of joining forces with Grays Harbor and Mason County is hopefully there might be some cost savings in that joint venture. And this, as I said, we've talked over every possibility inside and out continually. And so it's great to see some action being put to this. The studies and the consultants and the things is where you start with this. And I'm really hoping that in the future, in the less than 10 years, there can be a jail facility to actually put all the people that need to be in there, in there.
Be able to use it.
Can I ask you a question to follow up? So if state funding provided funding for our jail mid-'80s, was that a trend throughout the state? Because if that's the case, there might be an opportunity to look at some sort of coalition similarly to this, that the city did with our water sewer infrastructure, and look at maybe banding together with other communities experiencing this to look at it from a higher level, because I don't think a single jail facility in Mason County might be a very attractive project, but if we're looking at some sort of funding mechanism across the state that's affecting numerous communities, that might be something worth checking into.
Yeah, I agree. I think that might be a worthwhile conversation to
But I
have.
think we're getting a little outside of this particular
Yeah.
topic at the moment.
Yeah. Towards that end, there is a cost to the Department of Corrections for outsourcing their inmates currently, which is a huge drain on the state side's fiscal dollars. And if they can transition that into partnerships with communities where they can not contract through Swift and Certain or other types of outsourcing, but directly contract and partner for bed space, that's less expensive for them, and they are very much more inclined to participate in cooperative funding for that.
Commissioner Trask?
We were talking about the capital budget, and I think that there might be creative ways that we can go about asking.
Yes.
And so it's not gonna hurt to ask. I mean, no doesn't hurt that bad.
No, no, no.
No.
I've had lots of no's.
Not asking
Not
is
asking.
no.
Right, right.
So, like the sewer funding coalition, it could be like the jail funding coalition.
Correct.
Maybe it could work there too.
Anything else on this topic?
I will just say that I hope that as we move forward, we can be really clear, we can very clearly articulate to our constituents what this impact will be, and be very clear that this is not an immediate solution to building the jail, that this is a long-term strategy, and hopefully will have some immediate impact on our public safety, and really encourage conversations with our law enforcement and our public safety folks at the city and the county level who live this day after day and look at some of those creative opportunities with mental health and behavioral health resources and some of the other issues that folks are facing. Because I think it's very easy to wrap this up in a bow and say, this money is gonna get us a jail, and setting that expectation is going to bite us all at the end of this, because that's not what's going to happen.
That's right.
But I think we need to be very clear about what those facts are on both sides about what the new revenue will mean and how that will be impacting city and county services.
And as you take a look at what we have here, if you have any comments or feedback, you know, as you get questions in the community, and you know, if this doesn't, if it isn't sufficient, you know, let us know, and we'll continue to tweak things as we go forward.
Okay. Anything else from Frank or Jeff?